Birds at Gate 4. Brought to you by Curious Tale Audiobooks. Chapter 1. The Big Idea. Every morning, Chirpy, Flap, Beaky, and Tweetums sat on the same crooked telephone wire and watched the world go by. Cars honked below them, dogs barked at squirrels for no reason. But the coolest thing of all was the giant silver airplane that roared across the sky every afternoon. One day, Chirpy puffed out his feathers dramatically and pointed a wing upward. "Why don't we travel like that?" he asked. The others stared at the airplane as it sparkled in the sunlight. "You mean first class," whispered Tweetums. "With snacks," added Flap, "and tiny cups of juice." Beaky gasped. The birds were amazed. Flying in a plane looked luxurious. No flapping, no wind in your face, no accidentally swallowing bugs. You just sat there while someone else did the work. "It's genius," Chirpy declared. "We deserve a vacation." None of them stopped to consider one very important detail. They were already birds. Flying was literally their thing. Instead, they spent the next hour imagining how relaxing airplane travel would be. Tweetums dreamed about pressing the flight attendant call button over and over. Flap wanted to wear sunglasses indoors like a mysterious businessman. Beaky mostly cared about the free pretzels. "There's just one problem," Chirpy admitted. "Plane tickets cost money." The group fell silent. Finally, Flap shrugged. "Easy, we'll get jobs." The others nodded seriously, as if for tiny birds entering the workforce was a completely normal idea. And so the adventure began. Chapter 2. Birds with Jobs. Getting jobs turned out to be harder than expected. Beaky became a barista at a coffee shop downtown. At first, customers thought he was adorable. Then he started pecking every latte foam design before serving it. Hearts became blobs. Leaves became explosions. One angry customer received a cappuccino with 3 holes in the cup. Flap got hired to deliver mail because the manager said, "Well, he's already a bird." Unfortunately, Flap refused to fly because he wanted the full delivery experience. He walked door to door carrying envelopes in a tiny shoulder bag. Most letters arrived crumpled and damp from mysterious causes. Tweetums became a dog walker, which immediately became chaotic. The dogs were much bigger than him, and one golden retriever dragged him through a fountain while he screamed, "I'm technically your supervisor." Meanwhile, Chirpy worked at a movie theater tearing tickets with dramatic flair. He wore a bow tie and kept announcing every customer like royalty. "Welcome to cinema." Somehow, after weeks of disasters, the birds earned enough money for airplane tickets. They gathered around an ancient iPad borrowed from a retired pigeon named Carl. The screen was cracked. The battery smelled weird. But after 2 hours of pecking random buttons and accidentally ordering one garden hose, they finally booked their flight. "We're really doing this," whispered Tweetums. The birds cheered so loudly that Carl the pigeon fell off his perch. Chapter 3. Packing is for the birds. Packing for vacation nearly destroyed the friendship. Chirpy insisted on bringing 14 different hats for fashion emergencies. He packed baseball caps, fancy hats, a pirate hat, and one enormous sombrero that barely fit inside the suitcase. "You do realize we're only gone for 2 days?" Beaky asked. "Style never sleeps," Chirpy replied. Flap packed only worms, not clothes, not toothpaste, just worms. "What if there's a worm shortage?" he explained nervously. Tweetums spent 3 hours choosing which travel pillow looked cuttest before finally buying one shaped like a donut. Then everyone else bought donut pillows too, because they didn't want to feel left out. Soon the birds began arguing about airport security. "Do beaks count as sharp objects?" Tweetums asked. "What about claws?" Sawed Beaky. "Can worms go through TSA?" Flap whispered, horrified. Nobody knew the answers. After several dramatic suitcase explosions and one emotional breakdown over socks, the birds finally agreed to pack light. Each bird brought one tiny carry-on bag and exactly 3 unnecessary snacks. By midnight, they were exhausted. Still, they could barely sleep. Tomorrow, they would finally experience the magic of air travel. Chapter 4. Check-in confusion. The airport was enormous. The automatic doors whooshed open as the birds entered, and instantly they froze in amazement. Screens blinked everywhere. Suitcases rolled past like tiny cars. People rushed around carrying coffee and looking stressed. Nobody even questioned why 4 birds were standing in line for check-in. It was the modern world. Everyone minded their own business. Act natural, Chirpy whispered. You're wearing sunglasses indoors, Beaky replied. The birds marched confidently toward a self-check-in machine. Unfortunately, the machine was much taller than they expected. Tweetums jumped to press the screen, slipped, and disappeared underneath it. I live here now, his muffled voice shouted. Flap pecked the touch screen too hard and accidentally changed the language to Swedish. A nearby traveler finally took pity on them. Need some help? She asked gently. Yes, Beaky admitted. Technology fears us. The woman helped them print boarding passes, while the birds stared in awe at the tiny papers. These are powerful documents, Chirpy whispered dramatically. Flap immediately dropped his into a puddle of spilled smoothie. After reorganizing themselves for the 10th time, the birds waddled toward security, carrying neck pillows and emotional support granola bars. Everything was going surprisingly well, which meant disaster was probably very close. Chapter 5. Security Shenanigans. Airport security was complete chaos. Flap proudly stepped into line, wearing tiny, human baby shoes because he thought they made him look professional. Unfortunately, he forgot he had to remove them at security.com. The TSA agent stared at him silently. Sir, she said slowly, please take off the shoes. Flap gasped. In public. Meanwhile, Beaky's bag was flagged for suspicious organic material. The suspicious material turned out to be 17 pounds of sunflower seeds stuffed into socks. They're emergency seeds, Beaky explained. That somehow makes it worse, said the agent. Chirpy did not help the situation. Every 5 minutes he yelled, but I'm a bird. As if that answered every question. Sir, please stop shouting. But I am though. Tweetums accidentally flew through the metal detector instead of walking through it, causing 3 alarms to go off at once. The entire line groaned dramatically. One exhausted businessman muttered, I should have driven. Eventually, after extra screening, confused conversations, and one lecture about appropriate airport behavior, the birds were allowed through. They collapsed onto a bench, sweaty and frazzled. We made it, Tweetums said weakly. Then they looked up at the giant airport map. Gate 4 was somehow a million miles away. Chapter 6. Terminal Trouble. Finding Gate 4 became its own adventure. The birds got distracted almost immediately by a smoothie bar offering tropical energy blasts. Flap drank one too quickly and vibrated for 20 straight minutes. They rode through the terminal standing on rolling suitcases like scooters while angry travelers jumped out of the way. A toddler pointed at them and screamed, Mommy, the pigeons are vacationing. At one point, a baby tried feeding them crackers. Beaky accepted. Finally, after what felt like crossing an entire continent, they arrived at Gate 4 carrying way to many emotional support granola bars. Then they saw the screen. Delayed. No explanation. No estimated departure time. Just bad vibes. Beaky immediately began pacing back and forth like a stressed CEO with a broken Bluetooth headset. Tweetums built a tiny fort out of neck pillows and announced, I live at this gate now. Outside the giant windows, Flap befriended a flock of pigeons and somehow started a dance circle near the runway. Meanwhile, Chirpy live-streamed the entire disaster on Bird Talk under the hashtag #StuckAtGate4Life.com. An announcement crackled overhead. Flight to 47 is delayed due to weather conditions. The birds looked outside. It was perfectly sunny. Another announcement claimed the plane was waiting for a missing bolt. Just use tape, Beaky screamed. A nearby toddler handed him a juice box out of sympathy. Beaky drank it in one gulp. Chapter 7. Boarding Mayhem. After hours of waiting, the boarding announcement finally arrived. Instant chaos. Now boarding Group A. The birds stared at their tickets. What group are we? Tweetums asked. B, said Chirpy proudly. Flap squinted. I thought this said C. You're AC. Chirpy snapped. Take that back. Soon the birds were arguing loudly in the middle of the boarding line while a businessman sighed so hard it sounded painful. Once aboard the plane, things somehow got worse. The overhead bins were already full. Chirpy refused to let anyone crush his fancy hats. Beaky argued with a flight attendant about whether seeds counted as personal items. Flap accidentally sat in the wrong row and refused to move because it had a better window view. I've bonded with this seat emotionally, he explained. That's C2 to A, said the flight attendant. I know. Eventually, after several awkward apologies and one tiny suitcase falling onto a sleeping passenger, the birds found their actual seats. They buckled in nervously. The plane rumbled. Tweetums gripped his donut pillow. This feels expensive, he whispered. Then the airplane took off into the clouds. Chapter 8. Flight Frustrations. The airplane ride was not magical. First, Chirpy's tray table broke immediately and smacked him in the stomach. Then Beaky discovered his seat wouldn't recline even 1 inch. This chair hates me personally, he muttered. A baby cried nonstop somewhere behind them. Someone else kept kicking Beaky's seat rhythmically like they were practicing karate. The famous in-flight snacks finally arrived. A tiny bag of pretzels. That was it. Flap stared into the bag in disbelief. There are 6 pretzels in here. 1 is broken, Tweetums added sadly. The meal smelled like warm cardboard mixed with disappointment. Even the birds' emergency granola bars somehow tasted tired. Turbulence shook the plane suddenly. Beaky grabbed both armrests and yelled, "The sky is angry." Meanwhile, Flap pressed every button above his seat, trying to turn on the reading light, and accidentally summoned the flight attendant 4 times. By hour 3, everyone was miserable. Chirpy looked out the tiny window at the open sky beyond the wing. Far below, birds soared freely through the clouds. He sighed deeply. We gave up flying for this. Nobody answered because they were all too uncomfortable. Chapter 9. Luggage Let Down. Landing should have felt exciting. Instead, the birds stood miserably beside the baggage carousel, watching identical suitcases roll past forever. I've aged here, Beaky whispered. Tweetums finally spotted his bag only for another traveler to grab it by mistake and disappear into the crowd. My donut pillow was in there, he cried. Flap suddenly gasped in horror. My worm snacks, he whispered. You packed those. I packed only those. Meanwhile, Beaky's tiny suitcase was nowhere to be found. Every few minutes he would run toward a random black bag shouting, "That's him," only to discover it belonged to somebody else. The birds were exhausted, hungry, and emotionally fragile. Then Chirpy froze. Oh no. The others turned slowly. We forgot your birthday gift, didn't we? Tweetums asked quietly. Back at the nest, sitting beside a half-finished worm-shaped cake, was Chirpy's present. The birds groaned loudly. The idea of buying another plane ticket and repeating this entire nightmare felt impossible. Nobody moved. Then Tweetums blinked thoughtfully. Wait a second, he said. We're birds. Chapter 10. The Real Way to Fly. The airport fell silent around them. Tweetums looked at the others carefully. What if, he said slowly, we just flew home? Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Flap laughed. Then Beaky laughed harder. Soon all 4 birds were cackling in the middle of baggage claim while confused travelers rolled suitcases around them. All this time, Chirpy wheezed. We literally have wings, Tweetums said. Without another word, the birds rushed outside into the fresh evening air. The wind rustled their feathers gently as they stood together beneath the enormous open sky. For the first time all trip, nobody was stressed. No security lines, no delayed flights, no broken tray tables, no tiny pretzels. Chirpy spread his wings first, then Flap, then Beaky and Tweetums. Together, they leapt into the air. They soared above the airport lights in perfect formation, gliding smoothly through the clouds, while the sunset painted the sky orange and gold. It was peaceful, beautiful, natural. Flap zoomed ahead laughing wildly while Tweetums spun through the air doing happy flips. Beaky sighed happily as cool wind rushed past his feathers. Chirpy smiled. This, he said, is way better than first class. The birds flew onward together beneath the stars, finally realizing the truth. They had wings all along.